And offshore wind is made of three parts. The floating offshore wind turbines themselves, which will be 20 to 30 miles offshore. The transmission line upgrades necessary to bring that power both to Humboldt and to the wider state. And we need to construct and maintain those wind turbines. That is where the heavy lifting marine terminal comes in. The Humboldt Bay Heavy Lifting Marine Terminal will be the most apparent and impactful to our local community and will require a substantial redevelopment of Redwood Marine Terminal 1. This redevelopment will be impactful, no doubt, and I share the concerns of my friends from the aquaculture and fisheries industries who are concerned about the risk of introducing new diseases down the way, the impacts of development on their ability to harvest clean, safe proteins from our waters, and the difficulty of sharing a small bay with big turbines. I share the concerns of residents on the peninsula who will live, or who may live with a new industrial port facility in their backyard, together with the noise and emissions and traffic that come with that, not to mention the 900-foot turbines that this project will require. And I also share the concerns about the impact of construction and operation of the terminal on the wildlife of Humboldt Bay for creatures both big and small. And I share the concerns from Humboldt Bay's First Peoples with the proposed terminal, a literal stone's throw away from Tuluan, the center of the world for the Wiyot people. So I am not here to pretend that there are not substantial concerns. These are daunting, and yet I am also hopeful. Through active engagement with the community, I hope we can develop a proposal that works for the oystermen and the fishermen of the Bay, the residents, both human and non-human, of Humboldt Bay, and the First Peoples of this area. I encourage everyone here tonight to become involved in this project. The best way that we can ensure that this heavy lift marine terminal serves our community is for our community to participate. I encourage everyone to share their concerns and ideas, the community liaisons, and our breakout later in the evening. And I think by doing this, it's my dream that
what the project is, and I hope facilitates some discussion. So this project, I've been working with the Harbor District since I think 2022, in some early planning stages, and then my role now as project director, helping support our team. We have a number of different people here at the various stages as part of the consultant team, but Martha Nickel is the lead consultant. A little bit about our background. We're a California-based firm, been in business about 8 years, and our focus is ports and maritime tech work. So this type of project, we have good kind of national, international type experience, and have worked in the offshore wind sector for 5 to 10 years. Got to figure out this answer here. Okay. So for a project of this scale, you can imagine there's a lot of different aspects, details, analysis that needs to be done. And so we've developed a pretty robust team here. There's over 20 firms that are involved. At least 7 of those have some local presence, local staff. So that was very intentional. It helps bring together that good local knowledge and understanding of the conditions here, but also leveraging in with such a specialized type project that experience and knowledge from other locations around the country. The scope of this phase that we're working on is focused on advancing through a preliminary design, and the purpose of that design is to help provide the groundwork and information that's needed for the CEQA process and regulatory permitting. And just a little bit more, on all these different specializations. Seems like there's a lot of different companies here, but that a lot of biological sciences. There's multiple engineering disciplines, right-of-way, surveying, regulatory process, things like that. So the where, most of you are pretty familiar with the location. This is on the Samoa Peninsula. It's the yellow area here, and it's a former redwood terminal, formerly a sawmill, partially a log yard, natural resources type business. I would classify this as a brownfield redevelopment. It's a commercial, industrial waterfront facility with a marine dependent use with access to the channel. So the project here is primarily located in that yellow area. Now I'm going to show in some other slides here. There's some other components that are around outside of that. But this project is really focused on this terminal, and then there's some navigation elements to this as well. I'll show that some wet storage, but the project is really within the harbor. There's potential offshore wind developments that are out in the ocean. Those would be separate types of projects. So when we talk about offshore wind, this is just one example. It's floating offshore wind, and the reason for that is where the location of the federal waters are, where the leases are. It's fairly deep water. What some of those that have seen offshore wind in other locations of the country, like the East Coast, there's a fixed pile type structure. That's because it's shallower water in the East Coast. So whatever's developed here within California and Oregon and different areas that have been discussed would be some form of a floating turbine like this. This graphic here shows some of the different elements of what an offshore wind development would include. So the wind turbines, there's transmission line, there's AC/DC power converter, there's a lot of different elements here. But the focus, again, of this project and what you're going to see around on all the boards here is on the port development. The type and size of the elements are really crucial to have for its feasibility, is to have port infrastructure to help support that. So what does a port development look like? This is a rendering. This isn't the exact configuration of the site out in the Samoa Peninsula, but this shows a couple different elements. This is referred to as staging and integration. That's one element of operation of supporting the construction of the offshore wind farms. There's a future phase for operation of those once they're up and going, but the focus of this one would be in the staging and integration. So you can imagine these components are fairly large. They may be manufactured elsewhere in California, they could be somewhere in the United States, overseas. Those are delivered by cargo vessel. That's shown in the left-hand side, kind of upper left there. So there's a vessel berth for the components to come in. Those are offloaded, staged in the backlands of the terminal. You see that in the white features that are in the back of this graphic. Those are all staged there until operators are ready to start to do what's called vertical integration. So the yellow is the floating foundations, and it usually starts with that. Then they use the tower components and start to build it up vertically, put the nacelle on, and then blades. So once that's all assembled, there's some pre-deployment testing and quality control that's done on the quay side for the wharf, and then it's staged for towing out the channel and out into the ocean. So what are the requirements? I like to show this graphic because it kind of gives an idea and demonstration of the scale. And I always remind people on this, think big and think bigger. These are very large components. They're much bigger than anything that you've seen on land. As a result, they can't be manufactured on land and transported by rail or by truck. So that's where the ring ports come in. Without ring ports, this type of renewable energy isn't feasible. Requires a deep draught channel, somewhere on the order of at least 32 foot of a federal navigation channel, which your channel here is deeper than that. The heavy lift facility, so the wharf is the part that's out where all the vessels are staged there in that graphic. That's a 6,000 pounds per square foot load, and then the backlands or the yard is 3,000. Well, what does that mean? Modern terminals that have been built, like a container terminal, a little bit different cargo, but a modern terminal in a seismic zone such as Seattle Terminal 5 and some of the new terminals down in Southern California, they run about 1,500 to 2,000 pounds per square foot. So about a third of what the requirements are here. So as a result, these need to be purpose-built for offshore wind. This is a graphic from NREL. Tom had mentioned about some of the locations for greatest potential for offshore wind development. So the red or the warmer colors is a higher sustained speed that correlates to energy potential. And as you can see, that's there's areas all along the California coast, but the highest density of area is centered around Humboldt County and Eureka. What it doesn't show is across the border to the north in Oregon, there's an equivalent area up in that area as well. So Humboldt is very strategically located to help provide support for the installation of offshore wind turbines. So where does this all come from? Well, there's a couple of different elements. One is originally Governor Newsom's letter to CAR in July 2022 outlined some goals of 20 gigawatts by 2045. And then later, as part of the CDC updated in the AB 525 report, outlined more of a staged or phased development, a shorter term goal of 2 to 5, and then more of a 25 gigawatt over the longer time period out to 2045. The size of these turbines are estimated to be potentially 20 megawatt, so that's a pretty large size wind turbine device. So if you back calculate that, you're looking at least 1,200 turbines to meet that 25 gigawatt goal. So that's a lot of different elements. Because of the size of these and the time and complexity, the production rate of these, they might, a terminal might be able to produce 1 to 2 of these on a weekly basis. So you start to extrapolate that out, there's a number of ports that are going to be required to meet that longer range goal. So a little more detail of where some of those numbers and the needs come from. There's a variety of studies that have been done in the last 4 years or so. BOEM, California State Lands, CDC, NREL, others. Moffitt will help participate in many of these studies with a variety of different team members. But the outcome of all of those pointed to the need for a regional port network in order to deliver that larger scale build out of offshore wind. So in this graphic here, it shows, well, what are some of those potential staging and integration type ports? And this shows some of the, by the color, what some of the different ports that were evaluated and their likelihood of being able to meet the requirements. And so there's 3 green areas. Humboldt was identified as one, and that helps service the northern coast. And then the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach were 2 other areas that were targeted as high potential. There's 2 right now projects that have been planned. The Port of Long Beach has an offshore wind terminal that's planned, and then the one here that we're talking about tonight here in Humboldt. So just a little more information on the outcome of those studies. What it showed was there needed to be that, in order to meet that larger, longer term 25 gigawatts by 2025, needed to have 3 SNI sites. So Humboldt is one of those 3 sites. So this is a question that pops up. Is offshore wind still moving forward? And the short answer is yes. There's been some changes. We've all heard what's happened on the federal side. This project had a combination of funding from the CDC and from the federal government, US DOT. There's a couple of grants that we were working under. Those federal grants were terminated in September of last year. We were given a couple days to shut everything down and package that up. So the work continued, but at a little slower pace until the CDC was able to reallocate some funds, and that came back online earlier this year and got the engineering and the planning and the permitting process back up and going, and the reason for having public meetings tonight. So are there examples of these types of wind terminals? And the answer again is yes. There are on the East Coast a number of these types of terminals, a little more, like I said before, for the fixed pile, but the size and scale is very similar. The processes for the supply chain and the staging and construction, all that's very similar. So we have prototypes on the East Coast, but in Europe as well, there's a lot of good examples over there for floating offshore wind. I think Rob's been over seen a few of these. Josh Singer, who should be here at some point tonight, he's our port practice lead on offshore wind. He's visited quite a number of these on the East Coast and in Europe. He's worked on the planning and design of them. So if questions come up on examples of them, I think there's a board over here somewhere, and when Josh gets here, he can help answer some of those questions. So what is the project? I guess this is the part where I can ask for some interaction. How many of you here tonight attended the public meeting back in 2023? Raise your hands. So probably maybe a third. So that's great that there continues to be a lot of interest in the project and participation and coming out with questions and getting informed. So what you see, and this material has been posted on Harbor District's website, There's some other information on there, but this was what was part of the initial notice of preparation. It's 168 acres, S&I site. It's got wet storage. Those are some of the yellow areas that are shown there. It's got 2 wharves. And so generally, it hasn't changed that much since 2023. Now, there's been some refinement through additional data collection and analysis, assessments, and things like that. You're going to see that in some of these boards around here. But for the most part, there's similar kind of proposed activities. And I believe the estimated cost is around $2 billion if the entire project was built out. So this is the current state of the design. It's in the process of getting finalized in the next couple of months. There are some differences here that's primarily colors, but for the most part, like I said before, there's 2 wharves, there's wet storage, might be fewer wind turbine devices in the wet storage areas. It shows a little more detail in the upper left for off the terminal. That's partially as utilities, so there's power and water and sewer and things like that. There's also a proposed solar array on Harbor District property that would provide some renewable energy back into the grid. There's also, that's not completely shown on this, is some other off-site elements of some environmental restoration mitigation actions, community benefits, and then, like I said, there's some utilities that are off-site as well. So a lot of people also ask and are interested in seeing, well, what is this actually going to look like? And so on some of the boards here, there's some 3D renderings. And so this rendering is the representation of what it will look like based on the prior drawing that's more of a plan view that shows the scale of what the different components are, wet storage on the terminal. So that should be at one of the stations as well. So take a look at that, and it kind of gives a different perspective on what this thing looks like. So where are we at in the process? It's a little bit of a busy slide. I think it's on one of the boards over there as well. So again, like I mentioned a little bit ago, we're in the process of finishing the preliminary design here in the next couple of months. That also includes some additional data collection and special studies to help support that design. Then it's going to move into more of an assessment phase, and then starting to develop the CEQA EIR and permit applications. So there's a proposed resubmittal or update of the notice of preparation. That's going to be in August, and there's going to be a comment period associated with that. And then the draft EIR is planned for completion in the spring of 2027, so that would be in the March-April timeframe next year, and there'll be a public comment period on that as well. In parallel with all this going on, there's going to continue to be tribal and community engagement through this entire process. And we also have on there the importance of fundraising and grants. Right now, there's funding available to get through this phase and get through permitting, but there isn't funding available for construction, so that's another key element to continue the progress of the project. So with that, I will hand it over to Rachel.
Thank you, Shane. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out this evening. My name is Rachel Smith, and I'm the chair of the Community Advisory Committee, who's hosting the meeting tonight, and I'm going to orient you to this meeting and this space. But first, it was brought to my attention that these slides may have been hard to see from some parts of the room, so I just want to let everyone know that these will be available on the Harbor District website after this meeting, so you can look there to peruse them if there's some information you may have missed. I am a program officer with Core Hub. We're the Climate and Community Resilience Hub, which is a program of Humboldt Area Foundation. And I chair the Community Advisory Committee, which is a committee convened by the Harbor District to advise on community engagement around this project and the community benefit program of this project. And so this is a special public meeting because this is the first one that is hosted by community members. There are 4 stations around the room here for you all to engage with. So after this portion of the meeting, you will have about 45 minutes to wander around these different stations that are hosted by experts working on the projects, as well as community liaisons from the Community Advisory Committee. So we have over here the project design station. Over here, a station about the environment of the bay and also about the environmental review process. We have the community concerns and consideration station here, and community benefits and opportunities. There's posters and materials and information at each of these stations, as well as the community liaisons and experts to talk to. And we really want you guys to interact with these materials. So the job of the CAC is to inform and advise the Harbor District on what the community cares about this project. And right now with environmental review underway, it's a really important time to do that. So please use the question boxes, write down your questions. There'll be a panel after the 45 minutes of exploring these stations where those questions will be answered live by community members and experts. And there's also a question at each station regarding the subject of the station where we want to hear your ideas, your thoughts. We can do our job better as community representatives if we understand what the community is thinking. So if something's really unclear to you, if you have a really good idea, if you have a concern, please just get them noted here. I want to also note that at the front table, there's some general information about the project, as well as an email sign-up sheet if you want to hear more updates. And in the corner to the right over here, there's a kids station. So there's not child care there, but there are activities. So kids, please feel free. And there's also food in the back left corner there. So after you all have a chance to look at the station, we'll gather at 6:50 here for the panel Q&A. Thank you everyone for coming.